Hi guys, this is SDJRSNF88 speaking with another update on the railway room and Lyncombe Vale. So welcome to this 6th instalment on the room and of course the layout. If you're watching this live as a premiere, feel free to get the discussion going in the live chat to the side of the screen now. And of course, if you're not watching it live, feel free to leave a comment on any questions and queries you have in the comment section below. Remember to hit the like button. The last update was the most popular to date, and let's see if we can improve on that. Anyway, on with the update. As you can see, there's been plenty of progress to the layout. I recently had a week off work and I basically just spent the full week just working on the layout. And there's been plenty of progress and changes as we will see in this update. So without further ado, let's get started. So one of the first major changes since the previous update is the modifications to Devonshire Tunnel. As you saw in the previous video, I wasn't happy with the shape of the hills that I'd started to form there. Basically, they were very much rushed just for a little piece on camera. So I basically discarded those and started afresh. And as you can see, the results are much better now. We've got the valleys on either side. They've been shaped using pictures. As mentioned, the layout is slightly condensed down, so they are slightly shorter than, of course, the real thing, but they very much capture the shape and feel of the real cutting. And I can't wait to put the iconic little telegraph pole, which is still there to this day, in position in there at some point in the not too distant future. You can see I've also done the bit above the tunnel mouth itself, which has also been weathered. As mentioned in the previous update, I was on about getting some soot from the real site and putting it on this tunnel, and you guys really like the idea, so I can't wait to hopefully get back there and try that out at some point in the not too distant future. You can see I've also put in the walls. Now these walls are from the Hornby Skeldale range. They are the Cotswold dried stone walling sets, I believe, and they work really well. I've got to make a few little modifications to them to make them join up a bit better, but on a whole they give me an idea on where the walls will go. One thing I've noticed in many pictures and of course the visit to the actual site is these walls are very much part of the embankment in places, so I've tried my best to sort of manipulate these into the hillside and it's worked out quite well so far. You'll also notice there is a wall along the top of the tunnel mouth, and it basically backs straight onto the back scene. Now this is also there in real life and it's very noticeable in the real picture, so I had to get that in, and hopefully it will provide a nice little sort of breaker scene for transitioning into the back scene there. One thing it has done though, which is a bit miraculous, it's also saved my bacon in many ways, as I had a bit of a disaster with the back scene while setting up the hill. I decided to put basically a bit of marker paper on there, or a bit of very light masking tape to mark out the top of the hill. And when I went to peel it off, disaster, it peeled off a white strip on the back scene and left a rather horrible line all the way across. Thankfully, that wall is precisely the right height and hides that line. So it's, as well as being sort of an ideal feature that's going to go there, it also hides a bit of a mess up that I made. But on a whole, the scene is really starting to come together. Let me know what you think. I'm really pleased with how this area is looking now, and I can't wait to start adding the scenery to it. So in a recent update video regarding my latest article in Railway Modeler, which features the construction of watery bottom viaduct, I posed the question on how I was to add the stream to the layout and whether I should even add it in the first place. Now, as mentioned, the stream I discovered was there only during a visit to the site over the Christmas break, and in fact it's very well hidden in all the historic photos I have actually looked at the site. Anyway, I had some really great feedback from you guys on how I could implement this on the layout. As mentioned in that video, the reason why I was sort of a bit apprehensive on adding it is because of the contours of the fields. Because the layout has been slightly squished down, it means the angle of the field is steeper, which means, of course, the gentle flowing stream will obviously have to be a lot steeper, which means, of course, it can't be gentle flowing. Anyway, you guys left a load of different ideas on what I could do, and one of the best ones was, of course, to camouflage the main sort of steep bit in bramble bushes, which, of course, the real stream would have been back when the railway was running, which is one of the reasons why it was really hard to spot. And the more I zoomed in on the images I had, and the closer I looked, you could see there was a load of sort of foliage and bramble bushes there, which probably explains why it was hard to see the stream in the first place. Anyway, in that video you saw I had temporarily carved the stream into the hill, and I wasn't really happy with the angle I had done with that. You know, basically trying to figure out the flow of where the stream went to was quite difficult, and even visiting the site, parts of it are overgrown and I couldn't quite figure out where it went to. Anyway, one of the you viewers came up trumps with a actual OS map from the early 20th century, which shows Lyncombe Vale as part of the plan, and included all the sort of the contours of the hills as well as the stream. And from that image I could clearly see it made a number of 90-degree turns following the bottom of the hill before following the wall down to where the little cattle bridge is to. And that is something I have done here, and it really has changed the angle of the river and has made the sort of gradient a lot less severe, which is ideal for what I want. So I'm going to cover up part of this with brambles once that has been put into position, but the gradient itself is now not as steep as how I originally planned it, which is brilliant. So hopefully we'll be able to add that in the not too distant future, and hopefully we'll be able to make it look more like the gentle stream it actually is rather than the rapids that I was worried about. Moving on round to watery bottom viaduct, and this is where you start seeing some of the major changes. I've basically continued forming the landscaping here, starting off with the field in front of the viaduct. This was quite a challenge as there are a number of angles that meet here, and it's very simple to figure it out all in your head, but when you come to implement it by cutting Celotex and polystyrene, it really is quite complicated. Anyway, as you can see here, we got the rolling edge of the field which follows down the edge of the main embankment here, joining on to where the sort of the road, the farm track that comes underneath the viaduct itself. But coming in from behind that, you also have the edge of the valley on the other side of the viaduct, along with the path, and I've had to put sort of a raised area in here which sort of blends that hill in with the other hill before blending into the base, which of course forms the track which goes underneath the viaduct. Now, speaking of that little bit of road, I've also got round to lowering that. I mentioned in the previous update that was a bit too high. I've actually got round to lowering that now, so now the gap underneath the arch looks a lot taller, much like the real gap under the viaduct. Moving on to the other side of the viaduct, I've also done the sort of the valley going down, or the edge of the embankment going down towards the edge of the back scene. That's now been completed and blended in the hill there, as well of course blending it in with the tunnel mouth at the top. We then have the sort of little building scene, and of course the road and the track which goes up to the village of Lyncombe, or sort of up that way, also being added in here. Now that means I'm going to have to blend the road into the back scene. The idea is I'm going to probably blend it in with trees like I've done on a number of my other layouts, but it's a nice little tight track with dry stone walling on each side, and you can see I've started angling off a bit of polystyrene which will form the base for that road there, which of course joins onto the main road at the bottom of the hill there where it goes underneath the viaduct. We've also started raising the area where this little building is going to go to. Now this is another question I have for you guys. You can see I've got those buildings on the back scene there, and basically there's a little workshop or some sort of blacksmith sort of like building that you could see underneath the arch. Now I could either have the one that's on the back scene there or the physical structure. The physical structure is going to be quite tight to fit in there, and I think in reality it's slightly further back, you know, sort of where the actual back scene's to. So I'm debating whether to even put the building there in the first place. Let me know what you guys think. Should I have a physical building there or should I not? Of course, the washing line, which you saw in the previous update, is going to feature there, and I found a wonderful picture online which was taken from the other side of the viaduct, i.e. that side, which shows that area a lot better than any of the other images I had. And one thing I noticed, there is actually quite a sizable vegetable garden there, and I've got a number of different bits of veg which I can use and plant in a sort of like a little allotment there, so maybe I can add that in as well. So let me know what you think. Do I add that building or do I just leave it as the back scene? Looking underneath the arches, either or either look good, good visually wise. It's just, you know, the added hassle of adding building, but that is something that I'm willing to get round to doing. Of course, we've got the dry stone walling down there, which of course follows the wall of the road on either side, which again I've got to blend into the back scene in the distance there, which is going to be a bit more of a challenge. So again, I might use my classic image that I have, which I've used on many of my other micro layouts where I've blended the road into the back scene, including the iconic blend on Fry Somerdale. So hopefully we're going to have to see if that will work on here as well. However, the terrain is not the only thing I've been getting on with. I've actually got round to constructing another one of the iconic structures on this section of line, and that is Moger's Farm Bridge. Well, I think that's how it's pronounced anyway. This structure is rather interesting due to its shape, and trying to find a kit that resembled something similar was extremely hard. Even just finding the arch, the sort of an arch that was a similar size, was quite a challenge. So in the end, I opted for one of these. It's a Metcalfe red brick double arch bridge, and the span of the arch was pretty much spot on for what I needed. Anyway, it still meant it needed heavily modifying. So as you can see, the bridge is at an angle. So you've got a lower embankment on this side and a higher embankment on that side. So basically below this sort of wall area is how the kit is built, but then I added these little flares on to represent the bricks that go into the actual part of the embankment. I then added this section here to raise the actual section above the arch before adding this angled wall in, and of course changing the parapets there as well. So yeah, it really was quite a challenging build. It took about a day or so, and I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. It still needs a bit of work to it. I tried weathering it to resemble the blue brick effect, and as you can see, it didn't end up going too well, and it actually picked out some of the seam lines, which I was not happy with. When it's positioned on the layout, it's not too noticeable, but I'm a bit of a perfectionist and I want to try and get it right. So what I've decided to do is I've actually got a spare kit. Once again, thanks to D-Rails. I messaged him saying that I sort of messed up my bridge and would I be able to purchase another one, and he got this one to me next day. Sadly, I ran out of glue, so I wasn't able to do it. But the idea is to cut the arch out of this one and glue it onto the front to sort of raise the brickwork up on there a bit. And then rather than refacing it in red brick, which is how the kit comes, the actual bridge itself is blue brick. So I've decided that I've got some blue brick sheets, which I purchased along with it, and the idea is to completely reface the bridge with these bricks here before then going over with a tiny bit of weathering, not making the same mistake I did previously. I think doing this method will be a great help because it will cover up the join lines. Of course, you can't really see the join lines on this side because I haven't weathered it compared to obviously on that side where the weathering powder's got in and picked it out. But the idea is I'll cut those sheets as one complete piece. This is just a test piece that I made out of some spare Metcalfe sheet from another kit. This is actually the gritstone, I believe, which is of course too big and the wrong colour for the actual viaduct. But as you can see, hopefully putting that theory to the test, is the idea I will cut the blue brick to this sort of size and I'll glue it into position. Of course, I'll make a sort of a slot for the arch underneath, and basically the whole structure will be refaced with this sort of style of brickwork to make it more fitting to the actual structure. Of course, with the bridge assembled, it meant I could get round to assembling a very important feature on the layout. So with Moger's farm bridge complete, it meant I could finally get round to shaping the cutting. And as you can see, it has really taken shape and has completely transformed the layout. So what I've done is basically similar to how I created the embankments. I piled up layers of Celotex, which I then roughly cut a slot for the bridge to go in and then shaped the embankments around it. And again, this was very much a challenge. It took 2 or 3 days to get the shape just right. Again, constraints and size of the room did play a major factor in shaping this. But again, using many pictures taken, some by Ivo Peters and other railway photographers back in the day, and of course the images that I took during my visit over Christmas, I managed to get the rough angle of all the embankments and different sections to build up this cutting as a whole. So as you can see, the bridge slots in really, really neatly, and I used those sort of angled walls at the bottom to get the rough sort of angle of the actual cutting itself. I noticed when I visited the site that they were pretty much flush with the edges, so I managed to use that as sort of a guide and then shaped from there. I noticed that as it sort of fanned out towards the viaduct, it got less severe, so I angled the top to represent that as well. The far side up against the back scene was very, very challenging. Due to the radius of the curve, it meant that I would only have a thin little bit of that embankment in there. And I was really worried that I wasn't going to get the height needed due to the angle of the cutting itself. Thankfully, it is steeper on that side, so I managed to get more in than I expected, and hopefully once we get the static grass and the bushes on there, it will look the part. There's also some rocks that are sticking out, mainly towards the end of the bridge where the lift-out section is going to be too, which I hope to put and cut into the actual Celotex at a later date when I get round to doing the scenery. Now, a couple of you guys have wondered what this blank space is going to be. Now, the reason for having this here is to help me access the shelves above where Fry Somerdale and, of course, a number of my other micro layouts will be. At the moment, they're not in the room. I've removed them at the moment because obviously cutting Celotex is a very messy business and I didn't want any of the dust getting onto the layout, and of course meaning I couldn't get it out of the many, many trees that were actually on Fry Somerdale. So I've moved them temporarily out of the room. But anyway, this space will help me access those layouts and of course also help with camera angles. I've designed a bit of the layout. This bit here, this bit of the hill here will actually lift out, so I can actually put the camera behind those trees there and hopefully get a nice shot of the viaduct. At the moment, this isn't glued down just yet. This main bit will actually be lifted out so I can actually access the track and put the track down properly, along with, of course, the ballast and adding the scenery to the back embankment. Once I'm happy with the scenery over the back, I'll then pop this into position and then do the scenery on this piece here. It means that I don't miss out on any of the hard to reach areas actually inside the cutting, which is, I think, going to be quite crucial for this part of the build. Of course, there is then, once that is in position, it is actually getting around to adding a facial board. As you can see, having this sort of exposed Celotex on the front is not ideal, and especially when I've got my big office chair in here working on projects for Railway Modeler and of course my own projects on my workbench, I do have a habit of swinging around on the chair, and the back of the chair clips the edge of the Celotex, and I've already taken a few chunks out. So having a bit of hardboard on there will hopefully stop that from happening, and of course make this whole area look a lot more presentable. So to help with my research for the layout, I recently purchased a number of DVDs and books from the Somerset and Dorset Trust, and I decided to browse their site and have a little look and see what they had. And I came across this, so we're just going to unbox it. And it is this here. Hopefully I've got this in camera. It is a replica tablet for the single track section through Lyncombe Vale. Now this is what every locomotive had to have on board before entering the section, otherwise they wouldn't have been allowed to proceed. And basically this was given to the locomotive crew via the signalman either at the Bath end or at the Midford end, so they could enter the section before obviously dropping it off at the other signaller at the other end to allow a train to go back through. Now, I believe there was also another token or tablet system for banking engines, as there were many of the trains had to be banked through the section, so I think there was a separate tablet for them. But this tablet is what they would have used on pretty much every train that was in that section. This is of course a replica of an original one. I dare think how much an original one would cost, but I thought it would just be a really nice feature to have, and it has been cast from the template of an original tablet. So I just thought it's a nice little feature to have and sort of brings a bit more history to the layout. So once again, I hope you enjoyed this update on the room and of course Lyncombe Vale. There's really been some major milestones reached over the past couple of weeks, and of course there's still many more to come. It's now getting to that stage where it's almost ready for the scenery, which is of course one of the bits I most enjoy about building any layout, and I can't wait to bring this scene to life. One thing I best mention before I go, you probably noticed this shirt that I'm wearing is actually one of the Worley Model Railway Club's shirts. I'd like to say a massive thank you to them for sending this to me as part of the virtual Model Railway exhibition we did for them back at the end of last year. So I thought I'd put the shirt on and show you guys for this update. Of course, they are making plans for the 2021 show, which at the moment, depending on restrictions and other things, they hope to go ahead. Of course, you know, this is subject to change, so I thought I'd better put that out there. But do check out the Worley Model Railway Club's Facebook pages, their YouTube channel. They really do put up some great content, and they've been doing a number of live streams over lockdown, and of course their virtual show last year, so very much worth checking out. And of course you get all the news and updates on this year's show in there and on those social media platforms as well. So anyway, until next time, this has been SDJRSNF88 speaking, and thanks for watching.